Patricia Wouters now is going to talk about her own journey from I suppose it's a mother's and carer's perspective. I've enjoyed meeting you today and talking to you because I think you've also added a professional slant to this as well. So I'm really going to listen hard and looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about your experiences with Nick.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Will, and thanks to the organizers. It's just wonderful to see so many people here today. I'm here as a mum, and I'm going to speak about Nick's healing journey. So here's Nick. And here's a picture of Nick. We're actually in Hong Kong. I was at a post. We were living in China at the time. Nick's 15 years old here. This is just before the Chinese New Year. My talk basically is in 3 parts. The beginning, treatment, trials, and tribulations, challenges and opportunities. So the beginning, in February 2015, Nick came to me and he said, "Mama, I'm having problems with my eyes. I'm sort of squint. Is there something else?" So I thought, oh, well, I need new glasses. We haven't had glasses in a while. Because we were in China, through the university, Nick went from the optician, who told me that Nick had good vision, excellent vision, had problems with his eye movement. So they did a CAT scan, and they said, oh, I think there's something like, it looks like a cyst, but that's okay. Well, it's a cyst. And the next day, we had an MRI, and I'll tell you what, you've never had an experience when there's 1, 2, 3, 4 Chinese neurologists in a room pointing at a scan and talking Chinese Mandarin. We knew there was something wrong. So we, instead of heading off to Thailand for the Chinese New Year, for our kids' holidays, we got on the plane and came back to Scotland on Friday, February the 13th. And in an instant, everything changed. That's from Child Cancer Awareness website. It was never the same. So the beginning really is a journey for me. I'm a researcher, and I was a professor of international law, and understand very much PhD students, and thank Emma for her research today. It really was about focusing in the first instance on diagnosis. So before we got back to Scotland, I looked up all the brain tumor charities, and one of my first phone calls was to Helen, actually. And I got this brain box in the mail. I trusted some friends and colleagues and agreed that we should maybe have a first biopsy in Dundee. Now, why I agreed to that, I don't know. It was a failed biopsy. And thankfully, once again, through Helen Bulbeck, she said, I think the best pediatric neurosurgeon in the country is Connor Malucci. Email him. And I said, oh. So I emailed him, and he emailed me back immediately and said, Liverpool is open, feel free to come down. Under trials and tribulations, I've sort of divided my talk into 2 things. And I as a parent, and from talking to some of the parents here, you realize you go into research mode, and there's sort of a strong divide between medical. You really get caught up in the maelstrom of all the medical diagnosis and the medical procedures. And then when you have a time to breathe, like now, there's everything else, which I would say is not anything less impactful. So on the diagnosis, we started off with a biopsy, failed biopsy in Dundee. Then we were going to go to Edinburgh, but I talked to Helen, so we ended up going to Liverpool. So 6-hour journey in the car with Nick vomiting on the way. We walked in, Liverpool was prepared. He had him on, he had his MRI immediately. He took tumor samples, and then we came into the importance of diagnosing what type of brain tumor this was, and it ended up being a germ cell brain tumor. And we went from Friday morning, Thursday afternoon, saying, well, it looks like and it was interesting because the first diagnosis from the Mandarin that we could understand, one of the Chinese doctors wrote down teratoma. So we thought from the samples taken that it was a benign teratoma. Connor Malucci scheduled, we'll do a surgery on the Tuesday, we'll take this out. And then Barry Pizer walked in Friday afternoon and said, the markers, the blood markers have gone through the roof. This is a cancerous brain tumor. It was a non-germinatinous malignant germ cell tumor. We don't know exactly what's in there, but it's a mixed germ cell tumor. And then, so we turned back from Scotland, drove back. We went from Scotland to Liverpool and back to Scotland, and we're treated under a protocol. Now, I talked to David Walker, who had to go about the protocol, the constraints of a protocol. How many of you are familiar with the different protocols for the different brain tumors? Well, under the germ cell brain tumor, you fall into this is what you've got to do. 4 sessions of chemo, started in March, from March to May. Then you have second look. We went to Liverpool again, and Connor Malucci had a 12-hour surgery on June the 18th, took out what was left of the tumor. And then they sent us to Florida for proton beam radiotherapy under the protocol. Because it was under this European UK protocol, it was focal radiotherapy. So Nick just had radiotherapy, proton beam, to the tumor site. And you can see here here's a picture of Nick with Connor Malucci right after his surgery. And here's a picture of him his first serving and ringing the bell at the proton beam radiotherapy. So we started treatment, came back to Scotland February, March, had the diagnosis, March till May, the chemo, June, the removal, resection of the tumor, and then August until October, we had radiotherapy, proton beam focal site in Florida. And then December 8th, almost 3 years ago, we were with Hamish. Well, I'm so happy to see Yvonne here. Yvonne was one of Nick's favorites when we were at Edinburgh. And the team in Edinburgh, I can't say enough, or Nick can't say enough positive about them. They're fantastic, and they continue to be fantastic. So we met with Hamish because our lead neuro-oncologist, Mark Brome, who's been absolutely fantastic and very tolerant in dealing with me, Hamish said, this is a good news day, Nick. December the 8th, 2015, 3 years ago, it's all clear. It's all clear. It's worked. And that can happen with germ cell brain tumors. And then we got the phone call, December 27th. Still Christmas, we're getting ready for the new year. And our local doctor phones and says, the radiologist team in Dundee, because we had shared care, we live near St. Andrews in Dundee, but they review it. There's always a Tuesday morning meeting where the whole multidisciplinary team looks. The radiologist in Edinburgh missed it. And the Dundee said, what are those 2 spots at the base of the spine? It might be not. So then I spent between Christmas and New Year's talking with Hamish Wallace as he was driving up to the Highlands on holiday. Said, well, we discussed everything about how MRIs can be wrong, this could be nothing, and how they measure, and we looked, and January we had another look, and it was relapse to the spine. And then you look at the research even harder, and you realize that there is a difference in the protocol between the UK, European, and the American. In the American one, they do craniospinal. They do the whole shot when they're doing radiotherapy. So were we wrong in not doing the craniospinal and taking care of the possible progression to the spine? Or were we right in just doing the focal and then giving us a chance to do more radiation later on the relapse? Now, this is something more. When you look at the research for relapsed and mixed germ cell brain tumors, the type that Nick had, you know what the prognosis is? Guess, what's the prognosis? Relapsed germ cell tumors. 5%, 10%? So back to the PubMed. So I got to learn as a researcher how to read the research that only your oncologist will speak to you about, PubMed. So I got up and researched, and Dr. James Nicholson, a consultant who many of you know, Mark Brome happened to be on the germ cell brain tumor group for the UK and Europe, And the chair of that group happens to be James Nicholson down at, Cambridge. And so I emailed him. And I said, what are we going to do on relapse? I've looked at all the relapse therapy, and the numbers are like 4 or 5 people. All of your trials, the UCLA, he said, well, there's this one person who I think has written something on this. Here's his article. And the article was by Dr. Jonathan Finley, who is now at Chicago, but had done one relapse trial on relapsed germ cell tumors. I think the sample size was about 8. And two of them had mixed germ cell. So I wrote to Jonathan Finley, and he responded immediately. He sent me an email. He was on holiday in Brazil with his wife, had no internet access, and he sent me about 3 pages of this protocol, the Gempox protocol. So then I went to the Edinburgh team and I said, would you consider this Gempox protocol? It's never been done in the UK or Europe. And of course, what I've discovered is that the brain tumor medical community is really small. They all know each other. They said, oh yes, we know Jonathan Finley. He's this maverick over there doing all kinds of strange things, but yes, he did this, and we might consider doing this. So that was the only hope I had. And so what Nick liked, because Nick has been involved in this, what Nick liked about it was instead of going with a reinduction chemotherapy that involved the same chemotherapy that he had before for a week on, and then 2, just when you're good enough, you go back and get some more blast. This one had reinduction chemo where you just go in 1 day a week and then come home for 2 weeks and then go back in 1 day. So Nick wasn't back in Edinburgh for weeks, getting ill and then coming home. So that was sort of. But then we got into the high-dose chemo. And I thought I was going to die. That was hard. I don't know if anyone's been exposed to the high-dose chemo, but Edinburgh did a great team, but we were in hospital for 8 weeks. Nick and his twin brother, we're a family of 5, that was the picture on the front. Nick and his twin brother spent their 18th birthday in isolation, in the isolation ward. Nick had bad mucositis, couldn't even drink, let alone think about a piece of cake. The nursing team and the medical team were fantastic, but as a mom and a dad and sister, watching your twin boys, 18, in isolation, Nick's insides basically coming off and out, it was awful. It was just awful. So that was the high-dose chemo, and then we got into the stem cell transplant, and things got even better. I'll never forget the head of nursing there. I was talking to Yvonne at lunch today about, is Anne still there? Yes, Anne's still there. She was amazing. Nick was diagnosed at 16. We're happy. We tried going the adult route, and that was a failed biopsy, and I said, we're not going there. So one of the lessons I learned is for 16, 17-year-olds, if you can get into pediatric, it's tons better. Our experience, just exceptional. So Anne, Nick was quite tall. You can see him here, quite tall. They didn't have any beds that fit him, but they found beds. And when they did the stem cell transplant, they had 17 bags of blood and said the most they'd ever transplanted before were 2 or 3. So, and then we had to have more radiotherapy. So we had, for the first time, and once again, Sharon Peoples, who was the radiotherapist in Edinburgh, we consulted internationally, so we talked to Tom Merchant, and basically, the greatest finding, one of the biggest lessons for me, was finding this parents group, the Yahoo germ cell brain tumor group. My mom had started it up about 15 years ago. There are 157 families on there, mostly with young boys who have got germ cell brain tumors. And basically, we had access because when the mom or dad said, contact Tom Merchant, tell him Steve said to call him, they listened. They answered, they responded to emails. So our experts in Edinburgh were able to talk to the best people in the world on this brain tumor based on the communication between mums and dads and kids with germ cell brain tumors. So then we had an international consultation on what level of radiotherapy do you give someone to a tumor site, re-irradiation, which was unheard of before. You'd never do this 5 years ago. You'd never re-irradiate. So we had an international debate on this. The chemo guys, like the Jonathan Finleys of the world, said no, low. You know, the reason we give high-dose chemo is so we have low radiotherapy for germ cell. The radiotherapist said, no, 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 we need high. So it was interesting to see. And then we consulted an expert in London, I've forgotten the name, so we came up with the midway. So then we had to face, and there's the radiotherapy team, and I'll never forget the first time when that sign comes on, radiation on, and your son is in there being re-irradiated. And we drove from Dundee every day for 33 days, from September until November the 8th, the day of the US election. I'll never forget it. And we came home, and basically Nick just fell apart. And I started falling apart. His entire system had been decimated by this harsh treatment. But the first, and here he is, here you see pictures of his spine. Since then, the MRIs have been clear. We've got another one. We've got another one on December the 7th, and we get the results on the 14th. So you live through that hell, 6 month by 6 month. But here we are. So if that wasn't enough, and this is what I'd like to help Will and the team here set their agenda, I went to the germ cell, you know, my group, I went to the germ cell, the Yahoo group, the germ cell brain tumor group, parents, 157, and I said, look, going to Nottingham, going to talk to this group. This is the first time I've been out. It's the first time I felt good enough or strong enough to come and talk about this. And my son finished treatment 2 years ago. And this is the first time and going through all of the research, and I've got just a fraction of the research here. And I've got the days that I spoke to Helen and what she said, and the days I spoke to Jonathan Finley, all recorded. This is the first time I've been able to come out and speak about it, and I'm excited about helping to set an agenda so that we can help people to have, I want to help to improve outcomes for young people who have brain tumors and brain cancer. So I went back to this group, and the email messages this past week and the last week have been heartbreaking, because we already knew everything about all the treatments and the cure and the clinical and the protocols and the experts. But what we didn't know was how debilitating this is now. We have young children who have survived brain cancer, and now we have all of these problems. So I've divided them into physical, social, and psychological. And you've heard all of it before, and there's nothing new there. But I didn't know. And nobody really talks about it. And you saw it in the literature. I'm a way to go, and we can talk. Way to go. And I've supervised many PhDs, and I get you. And the literature review saying there's nothing on this, on the unmet needs. Oh, I guess there isn't. I haven't found anything, so there isn't. The physical outcomes of Nick's treatment: fatigue, systemic, health. And my biggest bugbear throughout all of this, the lack of integration. We had the best silos of expertise, the best oncology, the best radiology. Nobody talks about simple nutrition. Have you looked at the food they serve in the hospital? And don't anybody ever say, Nick can eat whatever he wants. You know, ice cream and cake, he's losing weight. No, no, and no. Have you not noticed the burgeoning commercial interest in health? Wellness is big business. And what are they all doing? Biohacking, the biohacking community. You can get your blood test done from any site on Facebook, pay 50 pounds. Why aren't we using that for our kids? Everybody else, you know, the people, the Bulletproof, has anyone heard of Bulletproof, Dave Asprey and all that gang? The biohacking community, where they all believe they can live to 105 because we're going to increase our nutrition, take these supplements, And yet our kids who come out of all of this treatment, you tell them eat cake and cookies and ice cream to gain weight? What about the vitamin A's and the vitamin B's and anyway, I went to my Edinburgh team, and one group was missing here, one group was missing are the pharmacologists, because I went to my team, and I can show you the research. I told them, I consulted internationally, and I had a list of, these are the supplements I'd like Nick to take before, during, and after his chemo and radiotherapy and post-treatment. And my oncologist, they just looked at me, what? And I said, yes. And it's all backed by PubMed research, because the group I went to, I consulted, I said, look, here are all the reviews. And so I prepared a paper with footnotes, there might be about 100, and they sent it to their pharmacologist, who came down, and we went through everything step by step, and Nick was able to take some. And so the whole physical side, what's missing is health. Real health care during treatment and post-treatment. And I talked to the dietitian. They had a poor student who was doing, we're talking to all the parents at Edinburgh today, and we want to know what you thought about the dietitian and nutritional needs. I said, well, first, you see that pamphlet you've got there? Throw that out. Dump it. I only found one dietitian nutritionist who was even prepared to talk through things and who was actually helpful. The rest, they just give you that Ensure and say, go home and eat cake. That's not going to do it. Everybody else at the top of their game internationally doing biohacking and taking the best of the best, and we're giving our kids cake and not thinking about all the nutritional needs and supplement needs and health and on and on. Don't get me started, I'm just starting. Social, the hardest thing for Nick and his twin brother, the friends, when you're not at school, not in high school. Did you know that your child could complete high school, could do hires in like 3 weeks? Nick did. He ended up with 4 A's. He had unconditional offers he's at university now. But it was because we were proactive. We're working with the schools. We had incredible people working with us. But it was hard, and it's still hard, because my children still wonder about themselves. Nick says he wakes up with, and he gave me permission to talk about this today, anxiety. He's got tightness in his chest, fear, grief. So the entire psychosocial aspect is what's flooring all of the 157 parents and families on this germ cell brain tumor group. They're all devastated. Kids don't know how to get jobs, can't finish university, don't have friends, might not aspire to getting married, all of those things. And I'd like to know what we can do about that. So I'm just about done. Lessons learned. The takeaway from parents. Big picture, you are the advocate. You are the advocate. Find the best people, read the research, talk to Brains Trust, or in my case also Brain Tumor Action, find out what they have to say. Do the horizontal scan. See what else is being done for your child's type of brain tumor. And then ask. And I have found the good are truly great. I've asked, do I think we're the best in the world? And they all responded and they all helped. The next one, which this group says, you are not alone. And I think we can find, especially through parents groups and charities, we can find help and strength from each other. Medical, what I learned was seek expert advice, and don't be afraid to. Don't be afraid to seek second opinions. Every professional will respect you, I think. Well, certainly my experience in Scotland has been they respect you for asking for second opinions, and I trusted the parents group to give me a heads up on who was good and who was the best. And everything else is what I'm focusing on now. And I put health in capital letters because I think it's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity. We're focusing too much on the brain tumor without looking at the whole person and looking at health tricks that we can find. So this is my big dream. My dream would be to create a research dream team, actually, And from my experience in doing research, putting together a group that could look at the whole health paradigm. And one question I've got now, and I hope someone could answer, why can't we use our blood tests? You know the blood tests that your kid gets every time they go to have their check? Why can't we use the blood tests in ways that the commercial units and all these biohackers are using to say what's missing? And I'm wondering about things like neurogenesis. Can we make new brain blood cells? Cognitive, have you heard of nootropics? Has anyone ever heard of nootropics? It's all those people down the Silicon Valley who are repurposing all kinds of drugs to increase their brain power and cognitive power. Has anyone here ever looked at that? And why not? So blood tests, I don't know if any of you have ever looked on Facebook at all the quantified body, quantified Bob, all the biohacking and functional medicine that people are doing to improve their health. Why aren't we using that in this community? It's not there. Nutritional integrated support during and after. I can share with you the considerable research I've done on every type of supplement for Nick. And when he moved into his flat this year with the roommate, they said, my gosh, you've got lots of tablets in the cupboard. Everything from omega-3s, vitamin B, vitamin B complex, the whole thing on gut health, probiotics. I've researched it all inside and out. Astragalus, mistletoe, all of it. And what I would like to do is to have an international dream team look at these things in a systematic and rigorous way. And I believe I could help to lead that group if I had the right people on the team. And then finally, the psychosocial support, the ongoing challenges that I think are not being met for our kids. So I'm just wrapping up now. We have so much thanks to so many, mostly to the Yahoo Germ Cell family group, but all of these charities I've been in contact with, and all of them have helped Nick in some way, many through nurses in Edinburgh who have applied. Nick should try the Cyclists Fighting Cancer, or we should get a day out for Nick with Willow, or we should, Rays of Sunshine, So Nick had days out and social support. I think the charities in this country are doing amazing work, including notably Brains Trust and the Brain Tumor Action. Brain Tumor Action, I was on the phone almost every day to Lynn Barty in Edinburgh and helped enormously. So here's a picture of Nick and my mantra throughout all of this, which is peace. I think most of us need, the greatest quest in life, I think, is for peace and for hope and for love. So thanks and best wishes, and anybody who wants to talk to me about any of these things, my email is there. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.